Hi, it's Justin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent. So today we're going to talk about sustainability in public procurement and how procurement shops are able to incorporate the kind of environmentally preferred standards in. We have a pretty substantial survey that we're going to try to roll out starting tomorrow on environmentally preferred purchasing. So I've got Julia Wolfe with us, who runs a program like that for the state of Massachusetts. So Julia, if you can introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about your program.
Sure.
I was very impressed with that. It seemed both effective and pretty practical. So I'm interested in what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to come and talk with you guys. And, I'm constantly learning as well. There's just so much happening out there and so many great ideas. So I'm the director of environmental purchasing. At the operational services division in the Commonwealth, we are the procurement arm. We set up master blankets for goods and services. So we're not, we don't do, construction projects, but we're just solely goods and services. And so there's actually been an environmentally preferable products procurement program around for probably 23 years now. So we're a pretty mature program. And then back in 2009, I wasn't here at the time, but there was, we signed an executive order, 515, establishing an environmental purchasing policy for the Commonwealth, which sort of shifted focus a little bit more on toxics in products. So we have a toxic reduction task force. We get together multi-agency and discuss products on contracts that have toxics and are there alternatives, and trying to come up with ideas and projects and specifications to go into contracts. So the way that our program works, so I'm a dedicated, employee that's sitting with all of the contract managers, and I do highly recommend that. I know that a lot of sort of similar positions to myself are located within the sort of Department of Environmental Protection or the Sustainability Department in the public sector. And, it's really important to have a very good relationship with the procurement programs, because there's just a whole different way of doing things, with procurement. And just to let you guys know, my background is actually environmental. I worked for the EPA. I worked for the Department of Environmental Protection. And when I came into procurement, I had zero, I had no procurement background. And just have been super surprised at how complex it is, and how strategic it is. And that's why, we're strategic sourcing. That's what we're called now. It's a lot of strategy that goes on in there. So what we do with our program is, the biggest thing is really trying to make sure that environmental products are in the conversation when we're bidding contracts or rebidding. And we've set up a process, with our strategic sourcing managers, where they come to me, and I'm kind of like a consultant, quite frankly, within the strategic sourcing unit. And we go over where the opportunities are for the bid. I'm not sitting on the strategic sourcing teams anymore. I used to, but what we try to do is pull me out so that I'm providing assistance and direction to the contract managers who are running the strategic sourcing teams. And, the biggest piece of this is really trying to make, and I just keep repeating this, making sure that environmental considerations and health considerations are really part of that discussion of best value. And that's just super important. And, I think that we've come a long way. There's still, we still have a path to go, but we've come a long way in that. And so now with the strategic sourcing leads, I work directly with them. We come up with a plan of action, how we're going to sort of be thinking about the contracts and the specifications, and really trying to integrate specifications, environmental and health specifications, into those contracts. So the sourcing teams, they decide ultimately what's going to be in the bid. So I sort of help with research, development, writing the specs, and really being in touch with all of my counterparts throughout the country, and with many nonprofit organizations as well, to try and understand what's new out there and what are the things that folks are doing. And we really try to use third-party certifications as much as possible.
We'll come back to that, because there's a web of those, right? So, but let's come around the room a little bit on how some others are trying to create that consultative relationship between the people who know sustainability and the people who are doing procurement. I'm going to go to Justin next, because he let me know has a limited window, and then plus he also doesn't get to come up on stage with us all the time. So I'm very interested in how University of California system is dealing with some of these same issues, because of course I'm sure that environment is important as one of the sourcing pillars there. So Justin, you run the strategic sourcing characteristics. So do you guys do anything in the zone of what Julia was talking about, or how do you try to make it so that the people who are doing sourcing can figure out how to tap into the sustainability knowledge without getting totally bogged down in the process of trying to think it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and really glad I could be with you today. In strategic sourcing at the University of California, we're lucky that our institution is particularly animated by sustainability. In terms of finding people to participate in projects, it activates students, many of whom are choosing to develop skills that they will use to pursue a career in a sustainability related field. It animates our staff and our researcher. But at the same time, when you get into a strategic sourcing process, it can be difficult to translate that commitment into tactical things or specific things that you can evaluate. So we handle it in a couple of ways. First of all, in our policy for the setup of best value evaluation, we require 15% of points to be awarded for sustainability criteria. Our definition of sustainability actually also includes diverse business related criteria as well. But that means that as we consider all the factors that go into a decision, we're going to consider environmental sustainability as well. We have a sustainable policy working group that often will consult with our project teams about different ways to consider sustainability in the category. We're members of the Sustainable Purchasing Leadership Council. They provide a wealth of resources in terms of thinking about how to evaluate sustainability related to specific categories. And then when it comes time for purchasing, and when we have purchasing that's happening through contracted relationships, we do focus on recognizing third-party certifications and using that as sort of a compass for people to make product decisions as they go through their day-to-day purchasing.
Very interesting. So, and we're going to be doing a survey starting tomorrow that is trying to dig into some of what requirements tend to get hit consistently and what certifications are recognized. And it can be pretty overwhelming. I've been enjoying my discussions with different with sustainability oriented folks in the last week or so as we've been trying to tone this thing up. Jaime, you helped me connect with your point person in Maine, and she was super helpful. So what have you heard so far, and add something to our discussion about how sustainability and procurement can touch and be effective together?
Yeah, I think Justin, right? I always, whenever you ask me that question on any of our Clubhouse chats, I go back to why is it important? What are we doing? Get everybody on the same page. And I think everybody can kind of agree that thinking about environmentally preferable purchasing in a sustainable way is this concept of reducing the negative effect on the environment and increasing a positive effect on human health and the environment. So Governor Mills in the state of Maine released an executive order and shortly thereafter a lead by example report, which if you do a Google search, it's going to come up. And so what that really means from our state perspective is that we're focused on a couple different initiatives. It's reducing greenhouse gas emissions, prioritizing energy efficient initiatives in state-owned facilities, transitioning to 100% clean energy for all state operations by 2024, emphasizing climate-friendly building products, purchasing 100% light-duty zero-emission vehicles, extend flexible teleworking options, right? Grow the share of local food purchased by state government by X amount of percentage. So when we think about purchasing and procurement and sustainability and environmentally preferred, it touches almost every facet of our lives, from the very small basic things that we can do as individuals, not bringing the plastic fork, not using the plastic straw, and instead taking a reusable fork that you can wash, taking your own water bottle, all the way up to buying your cars, changing the buildings. And again, procurement is always that centrifugal force that you have to get through in order to get from A to Z. To be successful, procurement has to understand what the status is today, what the goal that we're trying to achieve, and then setting the milestones, working with the marketplace to figure out how to get there. So I will use just quickly, Dustin, the ZEV vehicles, for example. Many states have taken this initiative. Let's move towards electric cars, electric charging stations. Let's move away from the traditional gasoline-fueled vehicles. And how does that work from a state perspective when the marketplace hasn't caught up yet? California is probably a great example. You can find electric vehicles all over the place. But in the state of Maine, where our climate is very different, we are having a hard time getting bids in from vendors just to provide us the vehicles. So that's where it's a critical component to make sure that we are having the discussions with the marketplace to say, here's what our goal is. How can you help us? And by having these types of conversations, we're only that much farther along to really preserving the very few resources, precious resources that we have on the earth today, right? And happy Earth Day. I had a fantastic weekend. I did some great hiking and out in nature. Got eaten by mosquitoes, which are popular this time of year, and of course the ticks and stuff up here. So there's lots of conversations happening around Earth Day, and I'm excited that this type of conversation is interweaving with procurement.
Yeah, and we're going to try to roll a survey out to as many public sector folks as we can do on how they try to infuse these concepts into their procurements. And then we're also going to ask corporate which sort of certifications and eco labels that they end up using to try to maybe do some analysis against it. So if you're listening, I would encourage you to take a look at that survey when it comes out tomorrow, and let me know if you want to go through it together. Let me ask a more generally open question. How do we make it so that end users know what they're buying has gone through that process? If you look back at that 21 for 2021 sheet that I did on the kind of content we want to focus on this year, is for my company, I wrote about sustainability being infused into everyday buying. So I'm interested in how, Julia, I know you guys have a guide, but it's not necessarily connected to your marketplace. So what are some of the best practices or the directions to how we let people know by this as opposed to that, you're making a better choice against our goals?
Well, one of the things that we've really been focusing on, and working with the National Association of State Procurement Officials on as well, is pushing our vendors when they have websites with products and services or services that they're selling, to make sure that those products and services that have third-party certifications are identified, and not just with a green leaf, but with the actual certification that it has. And that's going to be, that provides a lot more transparency. I'm very wary of a lot of greenwashing that happens, and making sure the vendors aren't just putting a green leaf on something and then we have no idea why it's considered environmentally preferable. So that's just one thing that I think is super important. I do encourage anyone doing an e-procurement system to talk to the providers, to make sure that products can be identified in the e-procurement systems. Unfortunately, in Massachusetts, we're not able to do that at the moment. Hopefully in the future, we will be able to do it.
Does any of the rest of the, and I didn't mean to jump in, Julia, it's just, I'm interested if anybody else has put in place a different solution to that problem or seen something they think was a good practice there. I'm actually keenly interested in that. So Jonathan, Jaime, Justin, have you seen anything different, or are you headed in a different direction?
That's one of the components, Dustin, that we will be looking at in the future for data collection. I'm not aware of any system right now that can adequately meet our needs. So I'm curious as to what others would think.
We didn't, whenever we did our e-procurement project here in Louisiana, we were surprised. Obviously we were aware of some participants out there, but there were some that we learned about for the first time. And one that I would definitely recommend to anybody who has a focus on eco awareness or eco-friendliness is it's a European company called Negametrics. I'd never heard of them. I'm willing to admit that. But they're a Dutch company, and apparently in the Netherlands, they have a law that requires that their process be entirely paper-free. So Negametrics is structured from beginning to end to never require paper. And so that was pretty much their best foot forward, was that angle. So I would encourage anybody interested in that to check it out, whether or not you already have an e-procurement solution.
And I know that EcoVadis does some scoring as well, and so there's different players. Justin, do you guys do any eco labeling in any form, like so that end users know this is better than that? Or
there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest in doing that, and there are just some challenges related to it. Earlier, someone talked about the concern about sort of greenwashing and some of those aspects are out there. So there's a little bit of a conflict of us wanting to do our own independent evaluation of items and to verify that they really are green, to accept third-party certifications and do that. To do that, item by item on that type of e-procurement data is really daunting. But there is just a lot of interest in how to solve that problem ultimately.
So how do you make sense of all the the eco labels? Like I was daunted by how many there are, and I don't claim to be a sustainability expert. I think I'm pretty good at public procurement, but learning that, I felt like I was learning things for the first time, and kind of got overwhelmed pretty quickly. Julia, you know what I'm talking about? There's probably 40 or 50 different labels that have different meanings. How do you make sense of all of it?
Yeah, there are a lot of eco labels out there, and there are multi-attribute eco labels. Those are the ones that we tend to prefer, the multi-attribute ones, and then there are single attribute eco labels, and it is there are a lot, but I think that when you're doing a procurement, you're going to have, so, what your products and services are, and it can be narrowed down because of the category, right? So we do, for example, cleaning products, right? And we require UL Eco logo and Green Seal and Safer Choice. And those are the three that many states who do include eco labels for cleaning products use. So that's, it's a discussion, I think, with other states, and also we're in good contact with EPA's EPP program as well. Can I just say one other thing just about the e-procurement systems? We've been in contact with Periscope Holdings we use Combis, which is a buy speed, and they have a new product coming out, Marketplace. And we've had a review, we've been able to take a look at that product, and it does have the ability to identify products on a product by product basis on whether or not it's green, just from an initial look. So I know that we're thinking about expanding. We're going through lots of, user cases and experiments right now to see whether or not it'll fit with what we do. But that there is the ability to do that with that software system.
As procurement officials, we are usually focused on the front end of how do we buy something or someone to come in and do a job. But when you start thinking about sustainability and environmentally preferred purchasing, it's not only how the product was created, thinking along the commodity lines, but it's how it will have an impact throughout the duration of the useful lifetime of the item. And then lastly, it's the disposal of the item. And CPOs are also often responsible for the surplus and or disposal of the item. So whether it's entering into another contract for recycling or working with your state surplus, when you think about a P2P system, you have to think about the beginning of the process, the middle of the process, and the end of the process to really achieve that sustainability.
Yeah, I've seen more and more the discussion about circular supply chain and thinking about not only acquiring the things, but then how we dispose of them. And your point about how do we reduce single-use purchasing if we have a chance to impact it, or packaging simplicity. There's a lot of factors, and I try to work a lot of those into the survey. And Julia was good on helping me go through it. And I talked to several sustainability folks and different things. So hopefully we hit a lot of these topics in the survey that comes. So Jonathan, we haven't really gotten a chance to hear from you on the overall approach in Louisiana to some of the sustainability programs on any of the stuff you've talked about so far. So why don't you jump in for a little bit and talk about what you guys do?
Sure. So in Louisiana, a lot of the sustainability measures that we've been able to implement have been in terms of the means rather than the ends. And so I'll put some meat on those bones. So like a lot of states, of course, we've migrated to a paperless process, e-signatures, again, getting rid of the triplicate, quadruplicate processing of contracts. So that's small stuff on the mean side. What I would want to express to the audience, to everybody listening, is that in some cases, it may not be that you have any sort of sustainable badging or labeling, or like if you're in Louisiana, having that is not going to make the audience more persuaded to use it. If anything, it would raise skepticism, unfortunately. But what we have been able to do is think in advance about what sustainable logistics for a particular good or service looks like. And so the best example I can give is aggregates and fuel. So, the state buys a lot of gravel, the state buys a lot of limestone, diesel, et cetera. And so historically we had done a statewide bid. We need these different tanks to be serviced. And sometimes we would get the strange experience of somebody being able to offer a better price trucking aggregate across the state, rather than sourcing it locally and delivering. And of course, for anything like that, which is super fuel intensive, we recognize that there is a hidden cost to that. And so one of the things that we've switched to, again, without having to label it as sustainable or anything else, even though it is more regional awards. In cases where we know that the logistics are very resource intensive, allowing local, allowing things to be sourced locally without creating perverse incentives for there to be wastefulness in the supply chain.
Christina, Katherine, or Lisa, I don't know if any of you guys in your practice, when you were purchasing, had to deal with environmentally preferred purchasing and had anything that you wanted to join in as we see if Kristen wants to come back in. So, Katherine, go ahead.
Yes, during my time in purchasing, I can't say that environmentally preferred purchasing was a hot topic. I know that it was up and coming, and it continues to be present in a lot of conversations. But I will say that during purchasing, kind of to what Jaime was speaking about earlier, is that when we are making purchases, we're not necessarily thinking about, once you buy a product, in this case, I'll say a car or anything that it's going to have an end of use cycle. So we're not necessarily thinking about what's going to happen to the old products, the old equipment. And that was one thing, as Jaime had said earlier, is that purchasing professionals, at least in Massachusetts, are often also in charge of getting rid of the surplus material. And that is something that I am very familiar with. So, and oftentimes it was a vehicle would be sitting in the lot, was no longer needed, and there would be other ways, to get a revenue from the vehicle. So it's nice to see that instead of it just being a purchase, that there's going to be a whole life cycle as far as purchase and what to do with the product you no longer need.
Excellent. So I'll remind anyone who's listening on the podcast that as the time that you hear this, we'll be releasing pretty comprehensive survey on public procurement's use of environmentally preferred purchasing in terms of approach, organization, what standards you employ in different solicitations, how you present those to end users so it's easy to incorporate sustainability into everyday purchasing. And we'll also have a section for corporate members to be able to talk about some of their practices and the kind of certifications or use that they see that adds value. So there's a place for both private and public to talk about how public sector can increase more environmentally preferred purchasing. And we'll leave that open for about 3 weeks. And then we'll produce some analysis out of that in the short term after that. Hi, it's Justin Lanier. Thanks for listening. Please find me on LinkedIn for original public sector operations content every week. And please reach out to me if I and my team of procurement professionals at Civic Initiatives can help you be a public procurement change agent.